I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is the author of the trilogy book Malitu, no other than Mr. James Lloyd Dulin.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. James, and can you please introduce yourself?
Yes. So I am the author of the Manitou series. The first book, No Heart for a Thief, just came out January 24th of this year. I'm excited because it's doing pretty well so far. This book explores two main characters, Kalo and Tayan. Kalo is um, a character in his 30s who's abandoned a war and kind of left behind his past and gets pulled back into it when he comes across Tan being attacked by two Imperial soldiers. And it kind of pulls him back into the war he left behind and the stories he left behind. And in order to keep Tan from following the same paths that he did, the same dangerous paths that he did, he ends up telling her the story of what happened to him. And so the book jumps back and forth between two timelines. And it really is a dual coming of age story as it tells the story of how Kalo became the person he is today and also follows the story of Tayan as she's growing and trying to um, figure out what she's going to do with her life after she's experienced the tragic loss of her family.
Congratulations for your debut novel.
Thank you.
So, what behind the title of your debut novel?
Well, the title's actually part of the series. Um, there are spirits in the Malitu series in the world of Ania. There are seven spirits. The seventh spirit is known colloquially as the thief, and is kind of a taboo spirit. And so the people have a saying: no heart for a thief, no safe haven, only a grave will do, because they've really outcast those who are descendants to the thief. And so those are the three titles of the book in the books in the series.
So, how did you craft it? No Heart for a Thief.
How did I craft it? I mean, it started with the magic system, really. Um, I was walking my dog one day, and as my mind was kind of wandering, I was thinking about the concept of sin eaters, and so sin eaters, a magical or a supernatural being who can literally consume somebody else's sin. And so this led to a thought about consuming magic and what that would look like. And so that's where the idea of the magic behind the thief came from. The thief has the ability to imbue her descendants with the power to steal magics from other people. And so that's where this idea really started from. And then just after months and months of it kind of lingering in my mind, the story of Kalo built up around it. But it really started with the magic system.
Wow, sounds interesting, Mr. James. So, who influenced you in writing this fantasy novel?
Yeah. Um, Lots of different people. I would say the most apparent is probably Patrick Rothfuss. Um, there's a similar framing device in No Heart for a Thief as there is in The Name of the Wind, where it is a storytelling as a character telling his story within the story. Um, I When I read that book, I think I was still in high school at the time. I just really loved how he was able to tell this fantastical story, but with such beautiful prose. And I have written poetry for a long time, and I remember thinking that this is something I want to do. I want to learn how to combine this amazing prose with some fantastical story. Um, and then there are other influences. I think Robin Hobb is a big one for me when it comes to character design and character crafting and really digging into the nuances of character. Outside of fantasy, I would have to say that The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde was a big was a big influence as well. At one point before we got to the final draft of No Heart for a Thief, there were um, there were footnotes that went into a lot of lore and things like that. They were voicey and they had opinion and attitude and things like that. And it was really inspired by what I loved from The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, which is really this it's a literary fantasy about a kid from the Dominican Republic who's spent most of his life in the States and trying to find himself. But you have these really interesting footnotes that use kind of the idea of world building to introduce people who don't know about the history of the Dominican Republic to that history. And so I wanted to take a little bit of that. And then it just kind of wove into the story over time.
Yes. So, if you describe your favorite authors in one word, what are they?
One word, that's hard. Poetic.
Oh, sounds interesting. So, being poetic is part of your writing.
Yes, I definitely think so. I wrote poetry and performed in poetry slams and open mics, and I did the National Poetry Slam in the U.S. A few years back, and so that really taught me how to write and how to figure out when to be very concise with my language and then when to elaborate and kind of build out. I really enjoy writing that where I can appreciate the writing itself on top of it communicating the idea it needs to communicate. So I want to enjoy reading the writing as well as understanding and following along with the story.
Wow, indeed. So, what is the big difference of writing poetry and writing a novel?
length length would be the first one. Um, Most of my poems were maybe one page, if that. Whereas, No Heart for a Thief um, is over is 125,000 words, so it's a little bit bigger. But I would say another big difference is um, you need more on the page, and that's more than just about more words on the page, but it's actually giving more description, giving more thought, giving more to the reader. Poetry is a lot about trusting your reader to fill in the gaps and make the words their own. And so they are, in fact, telling themselves a story. Even though you're only giving them 300 words, they're really filling it out. Whereas in literature, you're doing a bit of that, but you really need to carry a reader through a little bit more. So I think that there's just more structure and more language to help make sure that your story is going the way you want it to.
So, do you think in the future you're gonna publish a series of poetry?
I don't know. Right now, I'm really in love with writing novels. And so for right now, that's where I'm at. I have a lot of different ideas on the back burner that I can't wait to get to. So we'll see where it goes. Poetry is not uh, out of the running, but right now it's just not where I want to be. but I always find ways to slip it into my writing. So whether it's poetic turns of phrase or actually having, for instance, in the second book, there is a character who is a poet, and so once in a while he'll slip a poem in there. So it's never far away, but it's not my focus right now.
What is your short term and long term goal in writing?
I my short term goal is really to finish this series. The second book, I am definitely getting close to finished editing it. It's about to go to the copy editor probably at the end of the month. It will be out this fall. And then the third book I'm hoping to have out by the end of 2024. So hopefully the full series will be released by then. And then I have a few different ideas for books after that. Um, there,
Wow.
there's a sister series to the series that I'm working on right now that would take place in the same world. And then there's a completely different series that I'm also thinking of on top of a few different standalone books. So I'm not really sure where it's going to go. I think that depends on how well received the first trilogy is. And if people are clamoring for more in the same world, I will probably follow along that path. Um, but there's a lot of room to kind of figure it out as we go.
Yes, definitely. So, as your debut novel, what did you learn from it?
I I learned that I can write a novel. I started this process not knowing if it was something that I'd be able to do. And my first draft was, it, were promising moments in a very bad book, um, but it got on the page, and that was the big triumph. And then I learned that I could take something like that and stick with it and build it out into something I'm very proud of. Um, so I think that's what I learned. I learned that I was capable of doing this. Um, and since then, I've had lots of readers enjoy my story, and so I've also learned that um, I'm not alone in enjoying this story, and I'm happy that I'm able to share it with people.
Very well said, Mr. James. So, if you describe your writing, what is it? How you describe it?
Uh, Such as what about my writing? The structure, the tone, the prose. Is that what you're asking about?
Yes.
I would say if you're looking at a spectrum between absolute purple prose that is very flowery and poetic and everything's an analogy or a metaphor to very straightforward um, utilitarian use of language where everything is just straight to the point. I probably fall a little bit closer to purple prose. Hopefully, it's not too much that it gets in the way of people enjoying the story. I like to find interesting ways to turn phrases and things that make you enjoy the writing as well as enjoying the story. But I also like to move the story at a fairly quick pace. So I try to find some balance in there.
Yes, people. But before we go on, Mr. James, I want to shout out to the people listening in the United States, most especially in Michigan. Of course, in Detroit. Thank you for listening to my podcast. I got 16%. New Baltimore, Birmingham, Grand Rapids, Warren, Traverse City, Brighton, Holland, West Bloomfield, Plymouth, Garden City, East Point, Dearborn Heights, Jackson, Muskegon, Sturgis, Division, Westland, Twin Lake, Snover, Troy, Leonard, Zealand, Grosse Pointe, Gladstone, Hastings, and Paddle Creek, and last but not the least, uh, Ann Arbor. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, just like Mr. James Lloyd Dulin. So let's talk about the main character of your novel. What can you say about it?
So Kalo is somebody who um, you see on two different timelines. You see a timeline of him telling the story of his adolescence, and then you see him about 18 years later. He is somebody who really internalizes the world around him and takes a lot of responsibility for it, sometimes too much. And that often leads him to feeling guilty and kind of placing himself in situations that are going to be troublesome because he feels that he has a responsibility for the world. And that really drives a lot of who he is. Um, in order to kind of explore the world, uh, he's trying to figure out how he can become himself, how he can show himself uh, to be better than the person he thinks he is. He's a lot of self-deprecating habits, and so he's trying to overcome that.
Wow, sounds interesting. So, no heart for a thief. What do you think the flaws?
I don't know. I think it's hard to look at your own novel and kind of ridicule it. I think there are definitely things that are not going to connect with people. Um, so if you're somebody who doesn't like to jump between storylines, that's not. This is not going to be your uh, the most interest to you because it does jump between two different timelines. If you are somebody who wants a lot of action and plot points to happen readily quickly, that's this is not the story for you. If you're somebody who's interested in the really grandiose epic things that can happen in fantasy, this is also not the book for you. This book is so it's set in a time where Kalo's homeland has been colonized by this foreign country, and instead of focusing on the the generals and the kings and those people in power, it really focuses on people who have been hurt by this colonizing force. And it focuses on how these acts of colonization have impacted their lives, their ability to connect with one another, their ability to understand themselves and their past. It's a very internalized and intimate story. So if that's not for you, then this story might not be for you. But I think there's a lot in here for a lot of different people. If you're looking for something that's going to have a morally gray arch villain, this is also not the book for you. This what we have here is the main villain of the story is this colonial force, and they're not this big bad dark lord. Instead, they're a country that is really doing what it needs to take power, and I'm not really interested in delving into their story too much. This is about the story of the people that are experiencing their grab for power. And so, if you're interested in that story, I think you'll find a lot in it.
Very well said, Mr. James. So, according to Jolie, a great debut. Blending heartbreaking storytelling against a backdrop of vicious colonization and white supremacy. Can you tell us about that without spoiler?
Well, that continues along the same path of what I was just saying. Like this is about a colonizing nation that is searching for power, and um, they're using tactics of white supremacy that have been used throughout history in the real world. Um, um, Trying to change history on the people that have been colonized, telling them lies, using their labor for gains and things like that, um, bastardizing their history and their culture in order to assimilate them and gain more power and more control. So there are a lot of themes of colonization and white supremacy in the background here, and they're not heavy-handed, but they are the environment through which our characters are trying to survive. And so you're going to get some hints of how that kind of plays out when you're focusing on the people who don't necessarily have a whole lot of agency in the world. Um, and what little agency they do have is violence, and so trying to figure out how to live a life in that scenario.
Yes, and according to CJD's current read, one of the best debut I've read in a quite a while. Wow, how do you feel that thing?
It's been very flattering to get some of the feedback that I've gotten. I have heard some I've gotten some very nice reviews that have claimed that my book is one of their 5 top favorite reads of the year already, or have said nice things like what you just read. Um, it's just really it's flattering. It is a little assuring that I'm not alone in enjoying my stories. And so it helps me continue and push through, because writing can be a very isolating experience. And then you share your story with the world, and it's a little bit of a vulnerable experience. So it's exciting to hear when people enjoy my book. And, there are going to be some people who don't, but that's okay as well. I'm just happy that so many people so far have connected with it.
Definitely, indeed. And do you think the second book will be better from the first book?
I enjoy it even better. I think that the thing with a first book is there's a lot of world building work that you have to do. And where there's still world building in the second book, expanding upon the world, showing new settings and things like that, there's some groundwork already laid, and there's some character development already there. So you can go in deeper and try new things. I think that there are some people who really wanted more of the present timeline, because the past is so heavily featured in the first book, and I think that the people who are looking for that are going to get exactly what they wanted from the second book. I really enjoy some of the plot twists that happen at the end of book one and how they're playing out in book two. I think is going to be very satisfying for some people.
Yes, and your readers are waiting for it. When will be your second book, Mr. James?
Well, the second book is titled No Safe Haven. And as I said, it will be out in the fall of this year. So not too far away. Hopefully having a cover reveal in the next couple of months. I've seen some early drafts of the cover, and it's coming out very nicely. I'm excited for it.
Yes, and I interviewed lots of writers that for this second trilogy, it's like they give more focus to it. They enjoy doing it. They are satisfied that they did the second book, because I think the second book is where you combine all the three books. Do you agree?
Where you combine all the 3 books, I think that the second book can be a hard book. I think there is some leniency people give book one, because it is book one and it's a debut, and then there's pressure on book two to do more. And some books, I think, you read a second book and it feels like a filler to get from book one to book three. So I think that can be really difficult. But I also think it's where a lot of writers can shine, because they have, as I said, you've already done a lot of the world building and character building work, and you can just kind of elaborate and build out some really interesting things, and make and and give readers exactly what they're looking for, but then at other times twist what they think they're looking for and give them something else, and hopefully that's even more satisfying.
Definitely. Very well said, Mr. James. And all of your reviews are really good because they really specified where they like it and long. I like when they give you reviews and you can see it that in details and long sentences, just like your other reviews. He figured out where the characters first impression. So how did you make the book make your readers glued to it?
um I think what my book does very well is it provides this really close, intimate, um, one-on-one almost feel of getting to know these two main characters of Kalo and Tayan. And there are other characters in the book, and they're expanded upon. They're not just kind of idle side characters, but it really is about these two characters in book one specifically. And I think that if you like these characters, if you like the tropes that are utilized, you're really going to enjoy this story because you get to spend time really getting to know the nuances of these characters. I think they feel vulnerable and they feel human. They feel flawed and fully realized. And when you get to read a story where it feels like you're getting to know someone, I think that's a really great experience. And that's the kind of experience I like from books. So that's what I tried to write.
Yes, so No Heart for a Thief is good for a series or a motion picture.
Um, I don't know. I think that it might feel stretched thin if it would be a TV series. It would have to be a shorter TV series because it is so character focused. There's not a whole lot of plot points. And so I don't know if that could stretch a TV series as well. So I would say it would probably be a better motion picture.
Yes, definitely. I want to see this in a motion picture. So No Heart for a Thief. There are 39 chapters, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So for those chapters, which chapter do you think you have difficulty of writing with?
Um, and I think it's hard to pick out a specific chapter that I've had difficulty writing with. I think that there are chapters that were harder to develop over drafting. Some of the early chapters after Kalo leaves the village we first find him in um, were difficult to write, I think, because they required us to find a new setting and it was very isolating. It was just Kalo in the middle of nowhere. And so there was less to play off of. And so that took a lot of me learning how to create an introspective atmosphere where where we allow Kalo's thoughts to be the setting, and that took a lot of work. And so I think that's where a lot of my drafting and redrafting kind of took time to develop. Um, but I think it all turned out pretty well. It's hard to separate it out into chapters like that, though.
So which chapter do you like writing with, or you enjoy the most?
What did I enjoy the most? It's actually hard to remember the chapter numbers because they've switched around a little bit over time. But there is a chapter in the present timeline in which, without too many spoilers, uh, they're in a village and there is a looming threat outside the village. And I this is a chapter that I found really interesting to write because um, it is one of the very few chapters in which Kalo and Tayan uh, deviate a little bit. They're not interacting with each other as much, they're interacting with other characters for the most part. And I enjoyed being able to explore Kalo through his interactions with characters other than Tayan. Um, and so I would say that chapter, I'm having a hard time remembering what it is. It's somewhere in the high 20s.
Yes. So before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, with Chef Alessandro, one of the executive chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. So Food 101 is all about different kind of cuisine, interviews, and a lot more. So please do listen. Food 101. Plus one more, please do have a copy of my photography book, Spring Flowers and Panoramic View, are collections of beautiful flowers and panoramic view in British Columbia, Canada. So, Mr. James, are you independent or traditional publishing?
I am independently published.
So, what are the pros and cons of being indie author?
And there's we could spend 40 minutes talking on that. But the long and short of it, I think, is indie authors have a lot of space to create our own content without any restrictions. Um, we have the ability to control what we put out there more than traditionally published authors. So, whereas traditionally published authors often have no say so on their cover, sometimes they don't really have a decision on if their title is going to be changed. They're always consulted with a title change, but they might be really pushed on something like that. um, and the editorial the editorial feedback is driven by the needs of the publisher rather than by the needs of the author. And so what that means is that they're looking for a specific kind of voice, or they're looking for you to sound in a way that fits with their editorial vision of your book. Whereas if you're hiring your own editor, you're able to let that editor know what you are looking for from their editorial feedback. And so you're able to control the process a lot more. And I would say that indie authors or traditional authors need to um, take a note from what indie authors are able to do in the marketing world. I think there are some traditionally published authors, especially debuts and newer authors, who are doing a great job of taking the marketing reins into their own hands. But I think there's a lot of this older idea, this older mentality of if you're traditionally published, the company's going to do it for you. The publisher is going to market for you. And that used to be the case, but now it's no longer the case unless you're um, one of their go-to titles for the season. And so you have to do a lot of work in marketing. And I think indie authors are doing a really good job of being scrappy and kind of pulling that together. I think on the other end, being an indie is expensive. It can be really expensive to hire your own editors, your own cover designer, your own artists. The marketing is all on you, dollars wise and time wise. You don't really have other people helping you out in the same way. So you have to do a lot of research to try to figure it all out on your own. Whereas in traditional publishing, there's a lot more support. The money does not come from you. If you are offered a publishing deal and somebody asks you for money for that deal, that is a scam. Don't do that. But typically, you're going to get help with editing. You're going to get your cover art paid for. You're going to get some marketing help. You're going to have a platform to market from. They're going to really do a lot of work to sell your book for you because that's where they make their money. They want your book to sell well. I think there's a lot of positives on both sides, and there can be some negatives on both sides too.
So is it worth it to be an indie author?
I think so. I I would say if you're interested in being an indie author because you want to tell stories, yes. If you're interested in being an indie author because you want to make money, no. Um, and that's not to say you can't make money doing it. It's just saying it's a long shot, and you have a lot of work to put in before that money starts to come up. And so if you're doing it for the money, um, you're going to get frustrated and burnt out a lot more quickly than if you're doing it to tell stories. Um, I hope that my books will, in the long run, pay off the money that I spent on editing and cover design, and I'm putting out an audiobook which is expensive, and so I hope that my books will eventually cover that cost. But in the
Cross.
long run, if they don't, and I'm just doing this to tell some stories and I don't make my money back, or I don't make money off of them, I'm still fine with that because I got to tell stories. Um, if you're on the other side of that and you're not going to be happy uh, unless you make money, being an author might not be for you, but being indie is definitely a long shot.
Very well said, Mr. James, and cross my finger, you would earn millions. So, what is your aspiring message or inspiring message for all those people out there want to publish their books as indie author?
I don't know that I can inspire you any more than the stories that are already in your head. I think that everybody has a story to tell, and that is a very true statement. Very few people give themselves the grace, the patience, and the the leniency to tell that story and actually have the confidence to put it out there. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of fighting through self-doubt. And if you're able to do that, then you've done something amazing and you got to share that story. So whether or not you have the funds to hire the best uh, artists for your cover in the game, or if you just have to mock something up on Photoshop real quick with a limited skill set, if you need to tell your story and you need to get it out there, do that. There's something beautiful about sharing your story and sharing that journey with others, people reading your book and getting something out of it, because there is an audience for you, and I hope you find it.
Yes, people, Mr. James encouraging you to do your best, give, to share to the world what inside you. So thank you, Player FM, for giving me on the number 5 spot for being the best book review podcast. Thank you so much, Player FM. Mr. James, No Heart for a Thief. What is the best highlight?
The best highlight of my book,
Yes.
um, I don't know. I think I would say that the thing I am most proud of is my prose. I think if you're looking for a really well written indie book, I think that my book is definitely in the running for being one of those great reads when it comes to prose. I think I do a lot of things well, but I'm especially proud of my prose. And so when reviewers comment on that, that always brings a little bit of joy to my heart.
Yes. Crossing my finger, your second book will be a bestseller.
I hope so too.
So, No Heart for a Thief is, if you compare to a timeless novel, what is it?
A timeless novel. A timeless novel is a little bit of a hard one. I'm not sure that I have a timeless novel to compare it to. A very famous novel, I'd compare it to Name of the Wind. Um, and it's in terms of sh- story structure, it's similar in that it's a story within a story. It is a story about um, a man telling the story of his life and how he got there. It has a similar tone of, uh, a little. There's a little sadness under some sarcasm and some wit. They have some similar tones at times, and so I'd say it's comparable to Name of the Wind.
Yes. So do you think your debut novel will become a timeless novel?
I don't even know what that means really. I hope that it finds a home. I hope people that enjoy it. Um, but if I'm going to be really honest, I hope that in the long run, it's not my best book. I hope that I write many, many more books that I in that I think are better books, because I'm always learning something. I think book two is better than book one, and hopefully book three is going to be even better. And I hope that keeps on that trajectory keeps the same. So I hope that it's loved. I don't know that it's going to be timeless. I think that's a hard sell, especially as an indie author. Um, but I hope that it's the jumping off point.
Yes. So supposed to be best, better, and excellent. Oh wow. So Mr. James K, please invite our listeners to buy your debut novel.
Yes, of course. So my book is for sale on several different platforms. For for ebook, it is only available on Amazon. It's also available through Kindle Unlimited. So if you are a subscriber to Kindle Unlimited, it's at no additional cost to you to check it out. It's also available in paperback, and hardcovers are coming out on April 20th. So 3 days away from the recording of this podcast, hardcovers will be out, and then in June, my book should be out on audiobook. There's going to be dual narration, so we have two narrators that are going to be coming on board to bring No Heart for a Thief to life, and I'm very excited about that. So if you're interested in a print version of my book, it's pretty much available wherever you get your books. If you're interested in a signed copy, you can either find that on my website, that's jamesldulin.com, or you can find that through a bookseller, an indie bookseller called Silverstone's Books. And that's a great indie bookseller that does a really great job of promoting indie books. They have several different signed copies on their site from a lot of your favorite indie authors. So if you're interested in signed copies, definitely check out Silverstone's Books, or you can also get them directly from me on my website.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. James Lloyd Dillon, because if you support him, for sure the second, the third book is become more better and better and better. Mr. Lloyd, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Modicum people, see you soon.